And I start with collaborative projects. We call them something a little bit different in TCI. And I'll even give you a little funny anecdote that we have internally with our name of it. But I want you to look at this picture over here to the right. And when I think of a typical group in school, I typically think of 4 types of students that can cause problems. The student that always views themselves as Sarge, the student who I call Mr. Reliable, who's anything but, the chatty Cathy, who will talk about anything except for what it actually is supposed to be about, and then the one that is constantly and perpetually lost. Those are the 4 groups, roles that I sometimes see that always drove me crazy as a teacher. Maybe that's not your greatest challenge when you have the students work on group projects. What is it? And so I'd like you to share that with me in chat if you could. Take just 30 seconds to a minute and type, what is your greatest challenge when you have the students work on group projects? Yeah, Matt, that's the other one. I could have just had I could have had just like a blank profile for the student that's just not there. Completion, absenteeism, students having to do it online. Attendance, again, mentioned. Cooperation with one another. Chatting about things that are not related to school. That never happens. The distribution of the workload. Brian, that's a really important one. Shared ownership is what Chrissy said there at the very top. I don't like anyone. yes, there is some of that too there in the class. Tara said a level of learning, right? Because there are different needs of students inside the class. And so if you have IEP and 504 students, that's going to impact what happens. So there are a range of challenges when you're doing collaborative work. So then my question is, if it presents so many challenges, is it worth doing? Make an argument for me. Use the chat and make an argument for me. If it presents that many challenges, is it worth doing? Hope it's okay if I make you think a little bit. See a lot of similar sentiment. People talk about it being a people skill or real world skill that they're going to need to be successful. I think others have also pointed out that it is a standard, or at least it's in a lot of standards, the idea of collaboration. The science of learning also says that we learn more when we learn together. That is also something that I would throw out there. I think you all hit a lot of these. So we have this, kind of tension, right? We've got these challenges, but we also need to do it because it's important. So how do we get past that? How can we get past some of those challenges? And there's no silver bullet. And I'm going to share with you 5 design principles, and we're going to take a look at a problem solving group work lesson that we've developed and that you all can use there in Columbus. But there's not a silver bullet, but these design criteria will definitely wipe out most of the persistent challenges that you have when you're doing group work. Now we call it the problem solving group work strategy. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw this slide up here. Now, I'll tell you something funny a little bit about this, the name of this. If you type out problem solving group work in a Google Doc, it will tell you that you have misspelled group work. And in fact, there is no place outside of TCI where group work is spelled this way. It is only TCI that we did this. And the reason that that is the case is because it was so important to our initial developers, people like Bert Bauer, who's still around and is our founder and owner at TCI, and Jim Lebdell and Sherry Owens, that when they were developing these strategies, that it was so important that group and work were tied so together that they made it one word. That is literally the only reason that it is spelled like that. But it has caused so many problems for us when things go to printers, and it has that word in there. So a little funny, a funny anecdote. Now, when we do problem solving group work, you can actually see an example here in the background. It's one of my more favorite lessons here. This is actually a high school lesson where students are they are bringing to life figures from the Enlightenment, and they've each been assigned a specific person in history to bring them to life. But then what happens is there's a whole other group of students in the class who've got their back. They've helped to get that person ready so that they could come up and participate in these panel discussions. And that's a good example of where we've used this strategy. There are some guidelines that I think can really make a difference, not just in a TCI lesson, but they're going to make a difference in any kind of collaborative project that you have your students do. So let's start, just like we did with skill builders, with number one. Challenge the students with engaging multiple ability projects. And what we mean there, let's skip the engaging part because I think that's obvious. Anything that you do instructionally should be engaging at some level. I want to focus more on this word right here, multiple ability, and then the project part of that. Multiple ability to me means that it takes more than one skill set or one type of person for that project to ultimately be successful. So a good example, when you're writing a video, and we've been developing lots of videos internally at TCI for you all to use, it's not just one person sitting down doing everything, right? There's a script writer, there is people who go out and they acquire the images, there's people that use the software editing to make and mix the video together. And then of course, there's a producer and editor. There's lots of different hands in that project. In order for it to be successful, it needs all of those skill sets there. That's what multiple ability means. So you want to pick a project that it requires multiple abilities for it to be successful. And the reason that you do that will come a little bit later on, and that is that each person would be assigned one or more of those roles to that group and make them accountable to it. So that is the first step there, and it's an important one. The second is to prepare all students for successful group work. Very similar to Skill Builder. That's not something that you just spring up the day before you do the project. It's something that you've got to be leading students up to the entire year. Starts on day one. Get them working together with others on day one. Yes, day one is always give your syllabus and go through requirements. There are specific things that you have to cover, but also start to focus in on those collaborative skills and norms that you expect the students to be using. Make time on day one to be doing that too. Don't wait until day 2, day 3, day 4. Reinforce it on day 2, day 3, day 4. And it doesn't have to be long, but make sure that you're making time for students to work together with others all year long. That's how you prepare them for successful group work. Give members clearly defined roles and requirements. kind of goes back to right here. If you've created a multibility, a project for students that requires these different skill sets, then if everyone takes on a specific role and they're held accountable to it through the requirements, then it's much more likely to be successful in the end. What won't work is when you just throw out, all right, folks, by the end of the week, I want you as a small group of students to write a constitution as if you were the founders of our country. Go. No, that's not going to work. That will lead to chaos. So you've got to define specific roles. You've got to make sure that the students are accountable to them through the requirements that are there. But there's an important other part to this. And this one's going to make you, perhaps, it did me, a little uncomfortable. And that's this one. You got to give them autonomy and time to prepare high quality products. If you want a high quality product, don't give them an unrealistic time, frame. If I want my class to develop a really good constitution as if they were the founders of the United States, then I need to give them more than just say 30 minutes in class. I'm going to need to give them a little bit more time, because I want them going in and looking at like the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, looking at some of the tension that existed between the northern, middle, and southern colonies to understand why there was a New Jersey plan, a Virginia plan when the United States Constitution was developed. I want time for the students to be able to do that, and I've got to give them time to then take all that information in and develop their own. Same is true on autonomy. And I am guilty of this still. Even though I don't have students in a class every day, when I go out and I do trainings, I am a meddler and I have to keep time. I don't know if you saw me looking down at my watch while I was telling you all to work on demand and supply. It's because I'm a meddler. I can't, if you just leave me to my own vices, I'm going to interrupt and I'm going to stop what should be your time to work independently or together as a group. And teachers are notoriously meddlers. We go around, we like to interject in the groups as they're working. And sometimes, even though it's uncomfortable, not only for you, but even for the students, sometimes that autonomy means allowing those groups to struggle and even potentially fail. That's what that autonomy means, because through that process, there's actually some learning taking place too. Now, what you do with the grades with that, it's a whole other issue, but that struggle of autonomy, it's real. You've got to realize it as a teacher. You've also got to make your students aware of it. I encourage you, use this criteria with them and tell them, hey, this is what we're going to be following right here. These are all built into this little project that we're going to be doing. And part of that means I'm going to be staying out of the way when I need to be out of the way. And you might struggle, but that struggle, it's important. Lastly, is to have groups present their work. And it might seem too simple to put that there, but I have seen teachers before assign their students really, clever, I think, projects for their students to work on, only to get to the end and the students don't have a chance to show all that they've done to get there. They haven't had a chance to be able to present their work in a meaningful way for their classmates. And so that's what that last one there means, is to have their groups present their work in some meaningful capacity. That's what the criteria is. So those are the 5 that we put there and we use for every one of our lessons. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a dip into an 8th grade lesson on life in the West. And I'm going to show you where we put all of these processes along the way. So I'm going to go ahead and switch gears. We're going to switch programs. And I'm going to use the U.S. through industrialism, which is what you all use there at the 8th grade. And we're going to go down here to an expanding nation. And I'm going to go into this lesson on life in the West. Now, when I go here, again, what are some things that I'm going to want to do? I want to look at this planning area. I want to open up and I want to see these objectives. I want to see what I'm doing at the beginning, at the end, but then here it describes what is that problem solving group work activity. What the students are going to do here is they're going to create a documentary about a group of people. So they're going to be assigned one particular group of people who moved to the West in the 1800s, and the documentaries have to be based on images that are inside their student text. So we're going to give them, assign them a group of people that move west, and not everybody's going to be doing the same group, but they are going to be all doing the same thing. They're going to produce that documentary, and it has to be based on an image inside the text. We're going to give them an opportunity to be able to show that documentary at the end. So where would we get all of that? Just like we saw before, and let me close out some of this econ stuff that I no longer need up here at the very top. Just like we saw before, you as a teacher have a slide deck that you can use to facilitate it, but I also encourage you to click and share it with your students too. When you share that with your students, everything that you have as a teacher, they would then have minus any teacher notes. So we can see that this is also a lesson here that's built around an essential question. And Matt worked with you this morning about the inquiry process. You can actually start to see some of that just naturally embedded within a TCI lesson just as you do it. Here, we're having the students really dive deep on a compelling question. What were the motives, hardships, and legacies of the groups that moved west during the 1800s? Now, at the outset of this lesson, what's going to happen at the beginning is the students are going to analyze the lyrics to a song, Sweet Betsy from Pike. That's what happens in the preview. Even have the little audio in here. That's not disco. Oh, do you remember? So they're going to analyze the lyrics of Sweet Betsy from Pike as a part of their preview. But when we get to the activity, one of the things that will happen here is the students will first get a little chance to be able to see some of the powerful images that will actually help to set up them for success a little bit later on. So for example, here they see this image and then they have to kind of draw upon the image and the lyrics itself to kind of put it together. But I'm going to move forward just a little bit here. There we go. I actually want to get to the activity. Sorry, I was having a click issue there. Perfect. Here we go. So let's take a moment to look at the 8 images that are here. Your group, if you were working together in, say, a group of 3 to 5 students, most typically in our activities, we do 4. Your group would be assigned one of these images. Anytime that you've got images that are inside of your slideshow, when you click on them, they get nice and big, full screen for you to be able to utilize there. Now, let's do a little visual discovery, kind of tandem this with another strategy that TCI uses, and we're going to use the chat right here. Using the chat, I want you to tell me 1 or 2 details that you see in the image. What are 1 or 2 details that you see in the image? I bet I looked at this picture 100 times before the first person told me, hey, there's a steamboat in there. Right. So now, as a part of the project, if your group is assigned this image, then your documentary has to be based on the people that are featured here. Well, who are these people? Who are they? What do they represent? And what would we say about them in a documentary? So there is this natural inquiry process that starts to unfold, that the students are going to have some questions. Well, who are these people? Who is this guy right here? What does this person represent? Who are these people? I might think I might know, but I actually want to investigate that and dive a little bit deeper. So I'm coming up with my own questions myself as I'm looking at this. So I'm going to go ahead and close that one. We're going to give the students, assign them one of these different groups, and each group will have a picture to go with it. Now, when we do this, there's a little packet that we put together I'm going to show you it as we highlight it. But the reason that we put these little packets together in problem solving group work is so that we can follow, whoops, where is my slide deck? So that we can actually build this process right into the handouts themselves. So if we look at this right here, for example, and I need to move my Zoom camera out of the way, as we look at the steps for preparing the documentary, note right here, it says, let's review the roles. And what are those roles here? So when they're working within a group, there's going to be a director, a script manager, a props manager, and a producer. Those are the 4 roles. What is that tied to back over here? It's tied to 2 different design principles. It's tied to this one right here, that it's a multiple ability project, and it's tied right here to giving the group members clearly defined roles, because we don't just expect them to review it. What we're going to want them to do is, after they review these roles, they need to pick, what am I going to do? As part of my group, I am going to either be the director, script manager, props manager, or the producer. Or if we've got less than 4 people within our group, we might have to have 1 person that, or 2 people that would share one of those roles in addition. So it can depend, it can vary depending on the number of roles that are there. But that's going to be the first step, is we want the students to read through, understand what those roles are, and to claim one of them. The second part is we want them to learn about their Western group. So there is a portion of the text that has been set aside for each one of these groups. If I go into the text and we look at it here, and I open up just let's say this little toggle right there that actually shows me the sections, you can actually see what these 8 groups are. So we have the explorers, the Californios, the mountain men, the missionaries, pioneer women, Mormons, 49ers, and Chinese. Those are going to be the 8 featured groups that the students will bring to life in those documentaries that are there. So they will be assigned to read through, and every person in the group will be responsible for reading through and taking their content related notes. But then after they've done that, it will now then be time for them to create a storyboard for their documentary, because they're not just going to hit play on the or record on the camera and then start recording away. They've got to plan it out. And so it plays up into several different roles at one time, and we kind of call it out right here. But it's also highlighted in their storyboard that you provide them as well. And like we saw before, and I should also note this too, like we saw before, all of that is in your materials. You have it right over here, either in English or Spanish, that you can use with your students. So their handout is right here, okay? And it includes their storyboard as well that they would be using for it. And we do that in any problem-solving group work lesson itself. We do that very same process. So step 3, as they brainstorm and they finish that up, then they're going to go ahead and write a script. So they get an idea of what they want to do. Well, now it's time to put flesh to the bone. So what is that script? What are the things that we want to say and impart to people about these groups that move west? And this is, of course, going to include, again, some specific roles that are called out that they're accountable to. And then finally, they're going to prepare props and sound effects before they would actually then rehearse it and then present it. So these are the steps that they will follow to be able to be to the point at the end that they will be ready to show their documentary to their students, so to the other students. So all of the steps together, this is what it looks like. This is the handout that we used, and it's all goes right back to this design criteria. That is just an example of how a problem-solving group work lesson unfolds. What I would tell you just in general is that there are fewer problem-solving group work lessons in terms of strategy than any other strategy that TCI has. We have 6: visual discovery, skill builder, response group, writing for understanding, problem solving, group work, experiential exercise. There are 6 different strategies. The problem solving group work strategy is the least used in our curriculum. And the reason that is they tend to be the longest to complete, because you're going to need to give the students time to be able to put a high quality project together. One of my other favorites of the strategies, there is one in the high school where the students are assigned, and it's in our government program, where the students are assigned one chief executive, and they have to prepare as a group. They've got to prepare like a little exhibit to show, all right, what would a day in the life of Harry Truman have looked like? What would his desk have included? What are some things that he would have been reading? I mean, it's an amazing, actually, I don't think Harry Truman's one of them. I know FDR is one, I think Reagan is one, but it's like a selection of different presidents, and they have to bring that to life. Really like that. You will find that there's probably 2 or 3 in your program. So it's not like you're going to be encountering these, every week as you go through your TCI program, but it is something that you will encounter, and an opportunity for your students to do a high quality project based on that criteria. Questions on that strategy, or comments that you want to provide? If you want to throw that in the chat, or if you want to go off of mute, feel free to do so before I give you just some last tips here on the problem solving group work strategy. And I'll put them up while we're waiting for any questions or additional pithy comments. All right, so then just some last tips when you're talking about projects. And these we kind of have developed since COVID, because so many people were going online and having to, do complete distance instruction. But they also, even post-COVID, are still good tips that you can utilize. So, for example, I talked about making sure that you prep your students for group work and collaborative work. Well, make sure that you post your norms on your learning management system. I think you all use Canvas there in the district. So put them on your Canvas page somewhere. What are your expectations when students work together with a partner or with a group? What are they expected to do when they're in a group? Another is to create a spreadsheet. It could be in Google Docs or Excel, where groups have their name and what their role is right from the PDFs. But if you've got it on there, you can actually use it as a really good tool to go around and use visual observation of, are the students accomplishing those tasks? The group certainly is going to have their own packet, but if you've got a spreadsheet and you know all the roles as you're walking around, it makes it I think a more effective evaluation tool for you. So that's another tip that we have. Require the students to do some sort of a daily stand-up. Now, it could be, obviously, if you're in class, you tell the groups, all right, before we start work today, we're going to hear from each group really quickly. I want one person within the group to tell me where you're at in the process. It keeps them accountable, and it also allows them to get a sense of where everyone else is with creating those projects that we have in there. And then the last one there, encourage the students to be creative in how they showcase their work. It doesn't have to be a performance in class. The one that we were looking at there, the lesson in the 8th grade, they actually do a performance there at the end, almost like a little, what we call an acted out, bringing to life that image and how that group documentary would unfold. But in other lessons, it might be different. So use your creative juices to think about how students could share their work and take advantage of it. And it could, again, mean, just like the other items there, it could mean posting it right to your LMS. I'm sure the district would love to see students in action and seeing how all the great learning that's taking place in your classes. I actually want to go back and talk about what's similar between both these strategies and why we have all of our strategies, where you can find them once more, and then talk through that as well a little bit about the inquiry process too. So all of these strategies, they all teach content, every one of them. but they have a different flavor. That's what's different. The feel that students have, the setup, the actual activity is different, but the purpose is teaching content for all of them. That's very common between all of these. And again, when you're going through and you're looking at your particular program, you're going to see that these strategies are embedded into everything that we put together here for you. Sometimes even unsaid. I mean, definitely when you do a lesson activity, we call it out and specifically say it is this strategy. But it's just natural from us at this point that even in our unit introductions, our closing activities, that we're using these strategies literally every time that we're teaching content. And those will also, I think, as you master the strategies, they will prove so useful to you in other ways, because the last thing in the world that we want to do is pigeonhole you and put you in a situation where you have to do a lesson exactly the way that TCI has created or described it. That's not our intent. We want to create a great lesson, a great activity that you can utilize, but you should, as a teacher, always be able to take that and be able to manipulate it and move it in ways that will best meet your needs. And that means knowing the strategy so that you can know where you can pivot, what you can change. Again, where to be able to find some of this information. If it's about the strategies themselves, let's kind of refocus on that one last time, is that when you go into a unit and you're at a unit, when you select a lesson and you're at a lesson overview, you're going to find that specific activity called out as a strategy in bold right there in the activity level. And you can see this one says writing for understanding, which is one I don't think, Matt, we've done together as a group. But there are 6 different strategies. You can also go into the support area here, and you can get additional professional development where we're going to, where we have in the past had webinars and they're recorded, and you can go in there and you can watch them on different strategies that we've had. And part of my job at TCI is developing some more of our on-demand courses. And that is something that we're going to be working on in the future, is having a course for each one of the strategies that teachers can take. So there's always things that we can do to improve upon. And we'd love to hear how you're using it and what you'd like to see more of. So again, one last little plug there, provide us some feedback and tell us what's working great.